And it also looks like we have Dr. Adams and the rest of the admin cabinet as well.
Okay, great. So I need a motion and a second to start this meeting.
Lee will motion.
This meeting is being recorded.
I need, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Eileen?
All right, here we go with the mute thing again. Yes, aye, sorry. I don't know why it's doing this.
Okay, Jesse, would you mind doing the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Middleman,
Present.
Miss Manzi,
Present.
Mr. Kola Hafar,
Here.
Miss Villarreal,
Present.
Dr. Adams,
Present.
Mrs. Augulus,
Present.
Miss Panico,
Present.
Mr. Walshaw,
Here.
Mrs. Napolitano Furno,
Present.
Miss Kennedy,
Here.
and myself, Miss Kemp, the district clerk.
Does anybody else hear an echo or it's just me?
I hear an echo.
Yes. Yes, there's an echo.
There's too many mics on at the same time. So if you're not speaking, you need to be on mute, because what happens is you hear the reverb of other people's mics being on, and that's where you're getting that echo.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the meeting agenda?
Microphone, maybe that's what it is, Lee. Your microphone is on in between. Yeah, I have two things I want to add to the budget discussion, Bridget, that we didn't talk about. Well, we talked about it, but I don't think we added it on. Can you just explain to the community about the PPE line? And I also want to talk about the transit coordinator.
I never had time for that. Until I found Danny. It's clean food built on organic fruits and vegetables. That's ready in minutes with zero prep work. Get started today at dailyharvest.com.
Hello? Yeah, I'm sorry. I lost you for a second. I don't know what happened.
Are those new discussion items?
Can you
So I
really
would
just be
guess-
part of the proposed budget and during the budget adoption? That can be discussed during one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what the items were. Can you repeat them again?
PPE and transition coordinator.
Okay. All right. We're moving on to the rental of district kitchen facilities. Linda, do you have information regarding this?
No, not really. This was a request that went straight to the board, and then we received legal guidance. I actually called legal counsel earlier today, and I know that they were at other board meetings tonight. This is completely out of my jurisdiction. This would be something the board would discuss with legal about whether or not it was a viable interest of the boards.
I sent it to legal. I got contacted by the owner of Land's End. And they have a contract with New York City as essential workers, and they were requesting how they would go about using our kitchen on the days that we're not using it at the high school. And so I sent it to legal because I thought our buildings were closed and I didn't know if we could use it. So legal said that yes, we could for a rental fee, because I mean, if you saw the guide legal gave us, as long as we weren't giving away a gift of public funds and we were charging them to use our kitchen on the days that we're not using it. I had to put it on there. for get a price, a rental price, and see if we can't rent out the kitchen while we're at school. And
Because there's an animal being abused right now, and the next minute of their life could really depend on.
somebody has their computer on, I can hear background on TV or what.
I am muted and everybody's coming in and out.
I just turned off the mute because I couldn't hear anything.
Well,
This is a bad connection.
Okay, Eileen, can you just finish the last part of what you were saying, please?
I don't know what you heard or what you didn't hear. I got a request from the owner of Land's End to use our kitchen. I didn't know if it was proper. I sent all the information to the lawyer. I just forwarded it right to the lawyer who gave us legal guidance. If you read it, it says that we can rent out our kitchen on the days that we're not using it for a fee. And I wanted to discuss that with the board to have someone talk to them about coming up with a fee to use our kitchens, you know, with all the laws in place and get some income while we're not there.
So Bridget, would you be the
Did everybody
one?
get that?
Yes. So Bridget, would you be the one to look at what the fair market rental value would be?
Yes, however, I did not receive this before this evening, roughly 30 minutes ago. I still have not seen the request to rent the facility. I have only seen, and I didn't receive it through email, I had to go on to board docs to see what Gercio had to say. So unfortunately, I really cannot provide insight here.
Can I ask a question based on that? We have to find out why they're using it, don't they have to have insurance in case? And are people eating there? Or is it just a kitchen that they're using? I think these are all questions we have to find out. Are they using it for catering for somewhere else? I don't know.
I have the answers to those questions. They have a contract with New York City. I will re-forward the email to the entire board. I thought when legal answered it back, it all came with it, probably not. They have a contract with New York City to feed senior citizens, to make meals and feed senior citizens. And that's what they are doing right now through New York City. They have insurance, they have, I mean, Greg looked it all over, or someone in his office looked it all over to make sure. And that's what I told him, you needed to send everything to the lawyers. I had nothing to do with it. And I don't know the man, never met him before in my life, wouldn't know him if I tripped over him. It was a request and I thought it was a great idea. First of all, he's helping seniors. Second, it would be an income to our district. So I will forward that to you now, Bridget, so that you can see it, and also to the rest of the board and the cabinet.
Thank you. Bridget, when you get a chance, I guess look it over, and then we'll revisit this and have the attorney give us guidance on once you get a fair market value on the rental.
The other thing that I
Again,
think we need to look at, which I did ask legal to look into when I saw this, was, is the building considered open when they're using it? Because if that's the case, then we would have to pay for custodians. And I'm not sure about the contract for the food service workers, because generally when we allow folks to utilize our kitchen, they must pay for food service workers to be in there because there's a specific guidelines on how to clean. So I did ask legal counsel to look into the two pieces of our contracts to make sure that we weren't violating our CBAs with our internal units by doing something like this.
Linda, as somebody who's rented out commercial space, you can incorporate that into the fair market value, or you can also charge them a separate fee. You could do it either way.
Yeah, I just need legal guidance to say what we have to do in order to make sure that we're not violating our contracts.
Gotcha, of course. Thank you.
And make sure, to To me, it was a community member, local Sayville. And, if we're not using it and we could make money off of it and it follows all the things, that's why I sent it right to legal. And there doesn't seem to be a problem with it, but again, there's other questions that you have. That's why it's up for discussion.
Thank you. Definitely something to consider. As long as it checks off all the boxes. Does anybody else like to add to this discussion? Okay, we're moving on to the parent advocate. Eileen, I believe you added that on?
I did. Right before Linda got here, we did have a parent advocate for special education children. It was an unpaid volunteer position. I won't say her name, but there was a woman in that position for years and years and years. I don't know what happened, why the position wasn't reappointed. I did speak to that person, and they are willing to come back and do that as an unpaid position. So I'd like the board to consider a motion tonight to reappoint that unpaid position. And so that we have a special education advocate. From what I understand from many parents, this person saved us a lot of money on hearings and was able to negotiate things for special education parents that instead of us going to court, we were able to do internally and save a lot of money.
So would this person have the ability to, I'm hearing the echo again.
Me too,
So-
Mylin.
I know this person. She would be an asset to have back into the district.
Hello, I'm sorry. I was on mute. I couldn't talk because Jesse had my phone on mute before. I just wanted to bring something up with the thing that Eileen was talking about just quickly because nobody could hear me. I just called Jesse and she got me back. Can you hear me now, everybody?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, I think it's a great idea if we can do something with helping that company. I think he's from Connecticut, the person, and I think it's to help people. And if we can get a fair price for him, I think it would be a benefit for the whole community and for doing the right thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we're back to the parent advocate.
I'd be totally for that.
I know this woman. I've worked in the same, she's been an advocate for years when I've been on the board. She knows what she has to do. She knows her business and she understands kids, believe me. She has had many foster kids and she's a great parent. So I would say yes, she'd be an asset.
I would say yes as well. Having somebody there to help the parents, especially during this challenging time, and help them with anything they need that has to do with advocating for special ed or for the children who have any sort of needs, I would totally be for that.
Is this the parent advocate, Eileen?
Yes, it's a parent advocate. Well, it's a child advocate, really. But obviously she speaks to the parents. She is willing and able to do it again, the way that she did it in the past, where she, she follows HIPAA rules and there's no, she works for the parents, not for the district per se. She doesn't work for us. She works for the parents. She's unpaid. She's appointed by the board. So if everybody's agreeable, I'd like to put that on the consent agenda item tonight to vote on.
Of course, she's not paid. I mean, she's doing this volunteer. That's very nice of this person. I think it's a great thing.
Kids
Yes, I do remember this person and she's very well respected in our community. I just don't remember. So how does the parent get in contact with her? Is her name listed on the district website so that parents can contact her directly?
Yep.
Oh, it used to be. She was listed, where we have all the administration and everybody's listed, all the departments, security, all that. She used to be listed there as parent or child advocate, I don't remember which one, and a phone number. Or I don't know how, how they want to work it out. I think that would be between the admin and this person. But again, I spoke with this person today. I don't want to say the name, but they were willing to do it as long as they could work for the children. Not necessarily the district. Sometimes it, this person would be, not sometimes, all the time, this person's for the kids. What happens though is that she winds up saving money because she gives the parents real advice and great guidance on how they can move forward with the child. I believe she still gives advice. She's just not official, so nobody really knows that, that she's doing the background. So I'd rather it be official. A lot of parents don't know who to reach out to, and they actually have to pay people. This is a service that the district would provide for free, and it could.
Well, you have to put her name. You might as well say her name, but if we're approving her tonight.
Well, let's vote first, and then we can say her name. I don't want to say her name and then.
Well, let's make sure we're all saying the same name. There's no reason not to say the name if everyone's in agreement.
I just have one question. Will the parent have to? I just have one question. Will the parent have to sign like a waiver or permission forms for the parent to have, the parent advocate to have information on the child?
That was done in the past when I spoke to this person. They said that they did have the parent go down and sign forms, I believe at Prem with Ms. Santos. So I think that would probably have to happen again, of course. There's HIPAA regulations, so the parents would have to agree to that. But then again, they're hiring this person, but they don't have to pay them. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
It's obviously a win-win for the parents, for the children, and especially for the district. Someone's willing to volunteer their time, their experience and expertise. Why would we not appoint them?
Definitely. Sounds like a benefit
So
to
why
our
do we
community.
do we do it now, Mylan, or what do we do?
Yes, we could do it now.
Okay, you're gonna have to say her name. It's Barbara Brodsky, who's gonna be appointed.
Yeah, so I would have to figure the language to be used, but I guess it would be as clear as we'd like to put on the agenda to vote on having our parent advocate, Ms. Brodsky, to provide a volunteer service for our parents as an advocate.
That's right.
Good.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're moving on to. Did we get all the? Mark, did you have an aye?
Yes, I'm an aye.
Okay, I think I heard all ayes now.
I said aye.
Yeah, she seconded the motion. Okay, we're moving on to the budget adoption. We have line item 1, proposed 2020-2021 budget. Are there any questions or comments?
I do have, Bridget and I spoke today. She sent an email. As you all know, I'm not really happy with the budget and the cushion, for lack of a better word. I am willing to approve the budget as is, with the caveat that Bridget and she now understands what I mean, and she did agree to go through and tighten up that cushion. It was not her budget to start with. She's working on it and making it her own. I trust Bridget to do the right thing. She hasn't given me any reason not to. I'm confident that she will tighten up the budget so that we have better figures for next year. I do want to have Bridget talk a little bit about the personal protection equipment and what we were going to, how much that is and what we're going to do if we don't have to, if we're not mandated to purchase that. And I also wanted to talk about the transition coordinator. And I want to know from Linda, I guess, what that position entails. Why was it taken out? And from what I understand, it shouldn't be, but I want to hear from Linda about that position. That's all my questions.
Linda, would you like to answer that question, please?
It would probably be preferable for Monica to answer that question, but I will tell you why it was actually removed, and it wasn't fully removed. When we were originally looking at having a budget deficit, this person retired, and as well as a YFS worker at the high school. And we looked at those two positions, and the transition coordinator position is somewhat of a seasonal position because it's coordination generally as students begin to leave the system. And Monica can give you more information on that. So when we thought that there was a deficit with these two positions being open, we looked to combine the two positions. So it was never fully cut out of the budget and the program. There is significant value to the transition coordinator position, but we thought it could be served as a dual purpose with a YFS worker. Now that we have transitioned away from having a budget deficit, we looked back at those positions and thought that those two positions should be split again. But I'm going to ask Monica to discuss that position and what it actually does for our children.
Good evening, everyone. The transition coordinator, as I had stated last week in an email to the group, I do believe is an important position. I did recommend that the position be put back in the budget. It's a position that works with our students who aren't necessarily college bound. Some of these students could have employment and or could have some sort of employment / assisted living situation going on after high school. This allows us to help coordinate and plan, not only for programs while the students in the school district, say in the evening, weekends. It also allows for some community opportunities, for some job coaching and life after high school. So it is an important position, and if you can put it back in the budget and it would be a full-time position, I think it would serve the community well. Any questions?
If I remember correctly, Monica, I believe that this was actually spoken about at one of the SEPTA meetings. And I was pretty impressed that we had somebody that can help transition and coordinate these things to happen. So I thought it was an ideal person or a position to have in the district.
Agreed. This person has supported SEPTA the years that I've been in the district. And I know the position, although the person is retiring, the position can continue to support our students.
So right now that person has retired. So I'm assuming that would have to go out. If we kept that in the budget, that would have to go out for a hiring committee. Is that correct?
It says teacher on special assignment. I would defer to Reza for the process, but I do believe there's an interview process involved.
In other words, it's generally filled by an internal candidate who knows our students.
It's typically a teacher.
I would assume that would be
would
the
say
case.
that it would. I would say that it would have to be posted, and a committee of administrators and teachers would have to determine who the best candidate internally is. It would be a posted position, as all positions are.
Okay, can we also add that, Mylene? I'd like to vote on that. I don't know anybody else's feelings on that, but I'd like discussion on that and voting on that tonight, if we could.
That is currently back in the budget. That position itself is currently back in the budget, which is what we spoke with you in an email earlier, actually last week, that position was put back in the budget that you currently have in front of you.
Oh, okay. I didn't even realize that. Thank you. I remember being out and
Yeah, I thought I remember it being put back in. So Reza, would this person be working part of the day in a classroom and the other part of the day will be taking care of this commitment?
Mylan, the position, the way it functions right now is they don't have any classes. However, they work with all of our students who wouldn't typically be going to college, but would be preparing for life after high school, which would include some sort of assisted living and or some sort of vocational opportunities that could require some support, and they may actually be able to do independent. They work with outside organizations such as OPWDD and Access VR, just to set up our students for either some supported college, so some supported living, some supported vocation, and ultimately the hope is always that they can do all those things independently.
That's terrific. Thank you. I'm glad we have it included in the budget. So I believe since it's in the budget, there is nothing to vote on. Does anybody else have any questions regarding the proposed budget?
I would think, Lee, you might have some questions after you post on Facebook today, no? Is Lee even on here anymore?
I have no questions.
I am going to just mention that while I think it's very good to support a budget, it shows, as far as I'm concerned, that the board did their due diligence together and putting together with Bridget and putting this budget together. I am hesitant on the fact that we're missing a few key positions in the district, especially after reading some of the CDC guidelines that we may be having to follow. And I'd like to know that there is money in the budget to maybe reinstate these positions or maybe title them. I really don't know how to word this correctly, but I'd like to know if there's money in the budget if we see maybe in July that these positions may be needed. I guess, Bridget, you would be able to answer that question?
Wait, can I just comment on that really fast, Mylin? First, I did, Bridget, you do need to just elaborate on the PPE stuff. And then, Mylin, I want to just point out, and I'm sure Bridget will bring this up as well. Last year when we had our full budget, we had a surplus of $5 million. The year before was even more. This year we didn't expend all of our money. So I am sure that there is going to be a little bit larger surplus this year. Just my opinion. But Bridget, could you please elaborate and also bring up the PPE? Thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to start and assume that there may be some people from the community that were not on the phone call last night or Zoom, whatever you want to call this. So I'm going to start here and not assume that everyone saw the presentation and not assume that everyone knows what's in the budget. So I will start. The Connect Block's mission statement says that we're committed to providing students with exemplary learning experiences that will fully develop their potential in the arts, academics, athletics, and altruism in an environment of dignity and respect. So this educational plan, which is the budget, is aligned to the district's mission statement. As the board considers adopting this budget or the educational plan, we recognize the ability to be sensitive to the economic hardship and allow ourselves to be nimble as an organization to a series of unknowns that will not be clear on both the financial side and on the educational side for maybe weeks or months to come, but we are building the foundation for going forward and providing students with a sound and meaningful and lasting education during an uncertain time where stress and anxiety run high. We continue to develop, reevaluate our educational plan to stay current in the fluid situation that is COVID-19 pandemic while addressing needs of all the students, all staff, and the community alike. So tonight, we're asking for the adoption of the budget at the grand total of $199,437,938, which balances to the revenue budget, with an understanding that the educational plan will continue to be analyzed, developed, and nimble during the pandemic. This includes the tightening of the budget codes and the transfer of funds with the Board of Education approval to provide a sound education and fiscally responsible line-by-line budget. So to answer your question, Eileen, about the personal protective equipment, every week and every day, Governor Cuomo provides updates to New York State. His most recent update included that as businesses open and as construction reopens, employers are responsible for providing masks, cleaning materials, and whatever else for those employees. To date, as of this morning, the CDC did send out some documentation. It's about an 80-page document, and on page 45, there's an initial sort of recommendation for what schools should start to potentially think about. But to date, there is nothing coming from the governor's office indicating what schools should or will have to provide. And in him having to explain what we will have to provide, that becomes an unfunded mandate. So with roughly 5,500 students and about 1,300 staff members, if you include everything, that's about 7,000 people. If you assume 1 or 2 masks a day at 50 cents a mask, that runs about $600,000 or about $1.2 million. So providing additional funds as contingency and providing 2 different budget lines, both within plant and facilities and pupil personnel services, without knowing exactly what the mandates will be from the executive order from the governor's office. This just provides us to be in line with the ever-changing situation and to be committed to providing a safe environment, because that's our biggest responsibility: safety of our students, safety of our staff. And Mylon, I forgot your next question.
So I actually have a few questions based on what I see being floated around Facebook, the new CDC guidelines for reopening schools. So I have quite a few questions, and I believe all of these, or if not some of them, come with a price tag. So how do we teach children in kindergarten and first grade students not to share? How do we space desks 6 feet apart in small classrooms of 25 students? How many bus routes are created so there is a distance on buses? Where and how will we install sneeze guards, and how much will they cost? How do you space kids in secondary level when running for classes, when kids are transitioning from one class to the next? It also states no playgrounds or cafeterias. Packaged food, how is this healthy? No field trips, assemblies, no volunteers or PTAs will be allowed in the facilities. So we have to stagger our arrival and departure. Are we changing staffs? Are we adding staffs to create this staggered arrival departure? Are we hiring extra staff to take temperatures of students coming in and out of the building? Are we hiring extra staff to do extensive cleaning throughout the buildings? That's just a few of my questions. So when everybody wants to say that, you know, we want to keep the budget tight, and I certainly agree with keeping the budget tight, but when we have so many questions that don't have any answers, how slim can we keep this budget to afford some of these things that the CDC is sort of recommending?
Mylene, can I clarify then what I said? The reason I want it tightened, and Bridget and I had this discussion today, is for those things, is for these unfunded mandates. We have a lot of cushion right now, and I would like to see those tightened up so that the public can see when these unfunded mandates come down, we will be able to provide that without cuts to programs, to sports, to anything that has to do with the children. So that's our conversation today, Bridget and I.
So
that's just to clarify. We tighten it so that the cushion is available for these mandates that may come down the pike.
So the way I understand this, if we have, and Bridget, I don't have the revenue number in front of me. I'm going to just say we have I'm just going to make very even numbers here. Say if our revenue side is $200 million, right? And you want to tighten up your expenditure line. What do you mean by you want to tighten up your expenditure line? You want to go way below the 200? million that we have for revenue. Like, I don't understand
No.
that.
Okay,
Because
so
when-
I'll explain. I'm making it clear. What I want the public to see is if, and this is how I explained it. Well, I'll use small numbers. If I had 4 years of budgets in front of me, we budgeted $1,000 for a line item. The next year we budgeted 12. The next year we budgeted 15. The next year we budgeted 2,000. But if you go back to 4 years, our expenses never exceeded, say, $600. So our budget kept going up, but our expenses never went up. So what I spoke with Bridget about, and I think we came to an agreement, is that those are line items that we can tighten up to show the actual costs so that we can see what, because we know that it's going to cost us money down the road. This is going to cost us money. The governor is famous for unfunded mandates. So we need to know that we have that money in there and not, have this threat looming over our heads that we have to cut teachers and programs and services and sports and music and pre-K. I don't want to have to do that because that affects children even more. We have the money in the budget if we tighten up those numbers. Not saying that I think that the budget should be $150 million right now, because we know it can't be. We know that we're going to get hit with these unfunded mandates. It's just going to happen. It's a matter of how much. So if we have those numbers ready, and we start working on it now, then I think we'll be in better shape when we get hit with this. That was my point on that. And if I'm not clear, please ask me and I will. Bridget, maybe you can help me out and explain it a little bit better. I do have one other question, but I'll finish this topic first. I wrote it down so I don't forget.
No, Eileen, I get it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm fine with it. I like the way you presented that just now, Bridget.
Okay, so maybe my question is not clear. And I'm going to give you, our actual budget is $199,437,938. That is what our revenue side is. So when you say that you want to tighten up numbers, I'm thinking that you want to decrease your expenditures. When you decrease your expenditures, then you're decreasing your revenue side, because both have to tie out and be zero. So
So this is twofold.
Yeah.
First,
I mean,
we have to be.
Bridget, do you follow what I'm saying? You have to lower both.
Yes, I completely follow. There's a couple different things. So the first and biggest thing that is the unknown is that both governor and director of budget have explained that there was initially a $10 billion deficit for revenues received to the state. That was backfilled through the Federal CARES Act, and school districts, for the most part, remained relatively flat to state aid they anticipated to receive through the legislative budget adoption on April 1st. As we go forward, the governor's office provided benchmarks, 4 different separate time periods, where they're going to review revenues and let school districts know, except that they had stated by May 15th, they'd let us know after the first benchmark, and did not, what they have received and what school districts can anticipate to receive. So at Connecticut, we received $55 million worth of state aid, which is 28% of the revenue budget. That is a significant number. So as that number decreases, depending on the revenues that the state receives, we will have to come up with those monies from somewhere else. So on the expenditure side, to shift a little bit, but we'll get back to the revenue side, you need to put your contingencies and other items in place. You need to tighten up in areas that you may not expect to expend. Currently, we are unsure when we'll return in district. So there may be supplies, there may be contractual services, there may be equipment that we may not necessarily need. And there are expenditures that we can push towards later in the winter to see when we return, to make sure that we have all funds in place and available for these exact things that you're describing through the CDC guidelines. On a call today, both Dr. Adams and myself heard districts throughout Long Island state that they're unsure with social distancing and plexiglass on desks to distance students and retrofitting buildings in some fashion. What does that look like? How much does it cost? Is it a split schedule that we'll face? Is it a blended model where students will be in every other day or half online, half in person? Will parents feel comfortable to send their children to school? Will parents feel comfortable to put their kids on the bus? Because they have to be mindful of that as well. And most importantly, especially from the business aspect, will the state help us find financially and fiscally to fill the holes within these contingencies? Because it's significant, and will we need additional buses to have a bus at half capacity? Will we need to have classrooms at half capacity? But it's also important to note in those classrooms, if we're looking to shift students and teachers around throughout other classrooms in the district, it may not necessarily be their own. So how do you conduct a science classroom and an art classroom? As far as testing temperatures, is it something we're going to require before the student leaves their home? Is it something that the parent will report in a portal online before they step onto a bus or before they're dropped off? Or is it something that the school district will do? These are so many different things that we're still waiting for the governor to give guidance on, for the Commissioner of Education to give guidance on. And it's something that's ever changing day by day. Now, to go back to the revenue side of the budget, yes, for 1920, it is absolutely anticipated that we will not expend nearly what we anticipated 3 months ago when I almost just started before the pandemic existed. In the funds that we do not expend, there are ways that we can and cannot utilize those funds. By statutory limitations, unassigned fund balance cannot exceed 4% of your budget. However, districts feel really strapped and really pushed into and backed into a corner because of all these ever-changing situations, day by day, with different executive orders, with different information coming out, just with the disease alone. So in preparing ourselves and in understanding that there's a 4% limitation, but school districts may override that 4% limitation, in going through our reserves to see what we can utilize. And in those reserves, there's a lot of law that dictates what you can and cannot expend. Most of those are expenditure-based and liability-based. So for the employee benefit, it may be the case where it's liability both under a year and over a year. Our reserve is only 56% funded, and that looks out past and forecasts out for our full liability, because we have to also be mindful that additional people may retire, and we have to be ready to handle that expenditure, because you have to expend it first to be able to go onto your revenue side to put it on to that side. So it's not even being able to look at just the expenditure side, for me at least. It's looking at both and making them fit into each other. But it is completely doable in the 4% or going over the 4%. For unassigned, it's the same for appropriated fund balance and through our reserves. By tightening up, as Eileen explained before, on the expenditure side and working together on our educational plan with ever-changing things that come in from the governor's office, from the state, from CDC, and making sure that we tighten up as much as possible will absolutely ensure that we are not diminishing programs, that we're providing more in mental health, especially as people are isolated in home, because we're social beings and we don't deserve to be home, that we are ready to go no matter what the state comes back with today, whether or not we will see an impact to our aid.
Okay, so when we're still looking at expenditures of 199,437,938. It's how it's being appropriated and when you say you're slimming down, so you're not actually changing the bottom line. You're just changing the overage and how it would be appropriated.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, because that's where I think my misinterpretation came in. When you kept saying lowering, slimming down, I thought you were looking to cut the bottom number, the overall number.
Earlier, but I guess I didn't make that clear. Can you talk about the reserves again, though, Bridget? Is the budget, is that a separate line that we vote on, or is that included in this budget?
The revenue side of the budget you do not vote on. You vote on the expenditure. You vote on that grand total of 199, 437, 938, because your revenues have to match your expenditures.
Right, no, so does that include the funding of the reserves? You know, we talked about that today. We spent, I think the number was around 5 million, and you wanted to put in about 7 million of reserves, and I wasn't really comfortable with that. Can you just clarify that, please? Is that in this
Absolutely.
budget, or is that a separate funding?
So in the 1920 budget, there are 5 reserves that were looked to appropriate and fund the 1920 budget that you set in the 1819 April budget adoption in preparation for 1920. So as you utilize those amounts from those reserves, you back out that amount from the reserve, and in the coming year, and as you close out that year, you look to put that money back to refund it. It matters for workers' compensation because you have a liability. It matters for employee benefits because you have a liability. Because I explained before, you're only so sure about the employees and teachers and other staff that may retire. It's a bit of a critical situation now because more people might be incentivized to retire because it's a critical situation and they may have extenuating circumstances. So by funding that, and the grand total of those 6 reserves for the 2021 budget is $7.5 million, $7.25 million. So if you don't utilize that from your reserves, go ahead.
What did we take out of that? What did we expend from those 7 reserves? What did we expend? Because I believe when we talked today, the 7 million was about $2 million more than what we took out. And I did tell you that I had an issue with that.
Can
Right.
everybody
And
can everybody just mute their mics because I'm hearing everything very choppy.
So the reason why there's an increase from workers' comp reserve in 1920, it was 1.2. In the 2021 draft, it is 1.4 because we're going to have that much more in expenditures. So both the workers' comp reserve and the unemployment reserve are expenditure driven. So I cannot just make up a number to say 1.7. It has to be substantial. It has to be budgeted in your expenditure side to show that you're going to expend that to then put it onto the revenue side for the reserve. It is the same thing in unemployment. We have 90,000 budgeted on the expenditure side, and therefore we can put in $90,000 to the reserve.
Right. I think, I don't know if I'm asking my question clearly. The reserves, the 7 reserves that we funded last year, we spent some money out of it. And now we're putting money back in this year. What did we spend out of it? Was it 5 million and change? And now we're doing it with 7 million? Where's that extra $2 million then go?
So that the 2 million is that we're receiving roughly $1 million less in state aid. And the rest is from other appropriated sources. So appropriated fund balance increased a little bit because we anticipate to have that remaining with appropriated fund balance every single year. It's difficult to sustain the more you put in, the more you have to be able to sustain in years going forward. It's not just a one-year impact, a two-year impact. It is a significant impact for years going forward. The utilization of reserves is what roughly all 700 school districts do to offset the tax levy, to offset decreases to state aid and other revenues.
Okay, one last question on that. With the surplus that we have, and again, and it's traditionally been 5 million and up, I think I can say without reserve that it's going to be that or more this year. Can't we use that money to fund the reserves? Why do we have to add in to the budget for those reserve amounts?
We will also, as we close out the year and as more information comes in from the state and from Governor Cuomo's office to see what that impact will be for state aid for 2021, because there's a potential. What was that notification? There's a potential decrease or reduction in state aid from 5% to 20%. A 5% reduction in state aid for Connecticut, since we receive $55 million or anticipate to receive $55 million, is $2 million. A 20% reduction is roughly $11 million. So in 1920, that surplus there will help us should we see a reduction of 20%. All of that will go towards making sure that no programs, no cuts have to take place, and we continue to stay in line with our mission statement and preparing students for when they leave Connecticut for the world.
Bridget, thank you so much. I think that explains a lot. If we don't get the reduction and we do have a big surplus, how do we use that money legally? What do we do with that big surplus at the end of the year? Can you just explain that? And then I'm done asking questions, I promise.
Sure, absolutely. So I believe it was not the last year, but the previous fiscal year before that, where you had 10% in your unassigned fund balance. As I explained, and as you know, the statutory limitation is 4%. So when the Office of the State Comptroller came in, we had to go ahead and dump essentially that money somewhere. So that could go towards capital work. There's a lot of other ways that you could do that. You could return that to the taxpayers, which essentially that's what happens with the reserve. There's a time limitation with every single reserve. If you don't expend, if you don't utilize, you return it to the taxpayer. With appropriated fund balance, there's limitations in that as well. And the biggest limitation is for our strategic plan in 5 years and 10 years to sustain what we put towards that. So if in 1819 we put 6.6, in 1920 it adjusted downwards to 3.1, as that 6.6 wasn't sustainable. So if we tried to stay in line with that 6.6 from 1819 into 1920, we would have to appropriate that from somewhere else. It's difficult right now, especially for Long Island school districts in state aid, when year over year it decreases and decreases. It's also rough with the pandemic. It's rough with COVID-19. It's rough as we're backfilled in the Federal CARES Act and other hopeful acts we hope to receive, because sure, it may make us whole this year, but if it's anything like the gap elimination that happened in years prior, year 2 is something that we have to be prepared for. So by funding these reserves, by making sure that we have plans in place for every revenue on our revenue side, it ensures programs, it ensures keeping every staff, everything that you guys have strived to build for years and years going forward.
Thank you very much, Bridget. I appreciate your answers.
Richard, I'm glad that you tapped on the gap elimination, and I think that is where part of my concern is. So the idea that, you know, we'll be able to fund some of these CDC potential regulations or recommendations in conjunction with possibility of a reduction in state aid, I guess you can see where my concerns are, that we have enough to afford to pay for these things.
That's exactly what we are thinking about every single day, day in, day out.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jesse, did you have any comments from the public regarding the budget?
No, I received no other email since yesterday.
Okay, so we're moving on to the adoption of the budget. I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have Jackie, Mark, Eileen,
I'm an aye, yes.
Lee,
Well,
what? Lee?
I'm gonna say yes, but I feel as though this budget is educationally unsound, but it's better than an austerity budget. So I have no choice but to say yes, because I don't want us to have an austerity budget. But this budget is terrible, educationally unsound.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, we're moving on to the 2020-2021 property tax report card. Bridget?
So this is a really fun activity that all 700 school districts throughout New York State have to complete. It is immediately following the budget adoption. So for New York State this year, it is due on Friday, May 22nd. In the documents that were handed and delivered to your homes, I included the property tax cap. It is the principal summary from the Office of the State Comptroller. This is done in March of every year, so I included the one for close 2020 and one for 2021. I also included the financial statements audited by Cullen and Danowski in October of 2019. And these two reports, as well as the financial statements, is what you use to prepare this. So from the top, if you want me to go line by line through it, if not, I'll leave that up to you.
Can you pick out the highlights?
Wait, and can you just what the tax levy is, please? The number, is it 2.9, 3.1? I forget what you said. If you could tell us that as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. The proposed levy is 3.1%. The total is 129,665,481. This information is provided on the school district's website. It is also included both in the budget presentation from last night's meeting. It is up on that website. It is up from the February 25th with a detailed analysis and explanation for each component within the tax cap. There will also be additional information throughout the coming week or two for every person within the community, the board, and staff alike to be able to view in detail. So the highlights on the property tax report card, there are two columns. The initial column is what you budgeted in 1920. The second column is what you proposed for 2021. Column A, you fill out exactly as how you prepared the property, the tax cap calculation that goes to the Office of the State Comptroller. You start with your budgeted amount, which is the approved voter budget of 194,047,128. In that following column for proposed, that is the 199,437,938. You put in the tax information from 1920, proposed for 2021. And then you go down to your adjusted restricted fund balance. That goes through all of your reserves. That goes through non-spendable advance, followed by the assigned appropriated fund balance, which is directly out of the financial statements. The adjusted restricted fund balance as a percent of the total budget, which is exactly out of the financial statements off of page 10 and 11. If you're a nerd like me and you would like to go back and look at it. The final is just an explanation for your reserves, your balance, which you fill out for your last audited financial statement, which is closed June 30, 2019, what you propose for 2021, and how you're going to fund and appropriate funds for your coming year budget.
Thank you, Bridget. Well, on that note, does anybody like to add anything to this meeting before we adjourn and move into executive session?
I'm good.
Mark?
One thing, Mylene, we have to go into executive. There's something that we need to discuss there, and then we may have to come back out and vote in public.
Do we need to vote on the property tax report card, Bridget? Doesn't that need to be approved by the board and accepted? Or was it just
Yeah.
for their edification? Yeah, we need you folks to vote on that, please.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion, a second for the
Make a
2020.
motion.
Second, Jackie.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Eileen?
Yes, I say aye.
Okay, so we have all the ayes. All right, I need a motion and a second to move into executive session, please.
Motion.
I'll
Second.
second. Who seconded it?
Eileen.
Okay, so it's Eileen and Lee, all in favor?
Eileen
Aye.
says aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll see you in exec session.
Okay.